Hi everybody, I'm Professor Bruce, and today we're going to talk about Azure App Services. The documentation describes app services in this way, but the most important thing for you to know is that when you deploy app services, you don't manage the virtual machines. There's no system updates, there's no blackout times. You get to pick your language. App Services keeps it up to date all the time. It also scales within the limits you pick, and it provides a thing called deployment slots that we're actually going to talk about. You can deploy as many apps as the App Services plan will allow you. We'll talk about what an App Services plan is, but it's basically the virtual machine. And you can put as many apps as you want on it. And those apps can be RESTful, they can be mobile apps, they can be whatever. Today we're going to talk about when to use app services and how to set up a plan and how to put your web app in using the Azure portal. And we're going to set up all those resources today. When you use app services, you can use them for your web apps, lots of them. The virtual machine can hold multiple applications, so you can put as many as you want on it. You can use mobile backends, RESTful APIs, background processing apps, and here they talk about logic apps or API apps. All those can go into app services. You get to pick your language, whether it's ASP or open source or whatever, static HTML. You can use the containers. There's a new ability for you to be able to use multiple container apps for like WordPress even. App Services has basically three big parts that we can think of. The first is the App Services plan, and this is the virtual machine where you actually put your app services. Those app services apps are web apps, mobile apps, background apps, logic apps, those kind of things. And those are individual resources that are attached inside the plan. So you can think of the plan as being having the virtual machine or multiple virtual machines. And then the app is those applications that run inside the virtual machines. And then when you have multiple apps, you can have a thing called a staging slot or a slot. And in the staging slot, you can have production or staging, so you can put your application in and test it. You can even do A/B testing, and we'll actually show you how to do that in the demo here in a minute. The basic steps are that you create a plan, and then you create your app, and then you deploy your app into the web app resource. So we're going to start by creating a web app, and as we create the web app, we're going to go ahead and create the app services plan, and I'll show you that in the demo. In the demonstration today, we're going to go ahead and create a web app and deploy it into an app services plan. And we'll basically do it in that order. I've logged into the Azure portal, and I'm going to go ahead and create a resource. And in this, I'm going to be able to search the marketplace. So let's go ahead and search for web app. You can see it's on my list, but it may or may not be on your list when you go in for the very first time. So you go ahead and click on that. I'm going to go ahead and click a regular old plain old web app, and you can see about its characteristics here on the main panel. I'm going to go ahead and go create, and then it's going to bring me to the panel where I can create, and you'll see that we'll start with basics, then monitoring, then tags, and then we'll go ahead and review and create the resource. So I have my choice of app subscriptions if I want, and here I can pick down the resource group. If I've already created a resource group that I want to deploy to, I can do that. But in my case, I want to create a new one. I'm going to use the naming convention that I usually use, which is the name of the type of, an abbreviation for the type of resource. And in this case, it's a resource group. And then I'm going to go ahead and create the location. And then I'm going to create the name of my app. and then I usually associate a number with it because I may have different versions or I may have different deployments. I also typically will say whether it's a dev or not. So I'm going to go ahead and call this a demo. And then I go ahead and click OK, and that'll go ahead and let me know I'm going to create a new resource. Now in this case, I'm going to deploy a web app, and so I'm going to use a web app name that I've used in the past. This web app name has to be unique across all of the Microsoft Azure, and it'll deploy it into azurewebsites.net. Now you don't really need to worry about that. If you want to give it a different name or a different URL, you certainly can do that in a later spot, and I'll actually show you where you can do that. So you can either publish it from code or a Docker container. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select code because I want to show you the runtime stack. The runtime stack keeps up to date, so Azure actually manages this for you. So if I pick, for example, .NET Core 3.1, it'll always give you .NET 3.1, but it'll also provide the system updates and the behind-the-scenes security updates. So it's not going to be your responsibility to keep up with that. All you have to do is keep up with your app services plan. But you see that there's various stacks here. There's a .NET stack, there's Java, there's Node, PHP, Python, and Ruby. In this case, I'll just pick one. This will be my stack for my application. And now I can choose Linux or Windows, so I'm going to go ahead and choose Linux. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick which region that I want it in. And you remember that I already defined it as US West, so down at the bottom here is West US, and I'm going to go ahead and deploy it to that one. And now we pick our App Services plan. The App Services plan is essentially the VM that you're going to install it in. Now, remember, you don't have to manage the VM, but it's basically the sizing and stuff. So I'm going to go create a new one. I never don't like the names that they create. So I'm going to go and create my own name of West US. And my plan is going to be for apps for my Azure app. And I can put lots of apps in here, but this is the one I'm going to use for today. Now, I can now pick the size of my application. So let's go ahead and see what the options are. And the options you see here are for various sizes. I can select additional ones, but if I scroll down, I can see the exact characteristics that I have. Different applications have different sizes for memories and different features. In this case, there's an ability to do staging slots, which I'll show you in a minute. And then there's this size for app dev. So these are smaller machines, and they're a lot less expensive. It also shows you this here is this number of ACUs. That's the number of Azure compute units. So it gives you a good idea of about how much compute power you have. In this one, we have 100 compute units. And you see that this one is 210. So it gives you a good range of how much horsepower you're going to have behind your application. In this case, it's 210. It's going to give you 3.5 gigs of memory. It tells you the kind of computer, and it gives you a wild estimate about how much it's going to cost. So, and as I said, this one gives you the ability to do custom domains and SSL. So let's go ahead and click apply. And that's the one we're going to use. And the next thing I'm going to do is click monitoring. And in monitoring, I'll have a chance to enable App Insights, where I can put App Insights into my resources also, or tie it to an existing applications insight instance that I may have. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it off for now. And next I'm going to do tags. And I always recommend you do tags. I'm going to go ahead and do a cost center tag. My recommendation is to not use spaces. You can use spaces in here, but it makes it harder to build command line searches. And I'm going to do it I'm going to put it into the demo group. And you're going to see I'm going to create two resources. I'm going to create an app services plan and the web app. Next, I'm going to go ahead. Microsoft is going to go ahead and review the settings that I have to see if there's anything inconsistent. And you see so far everything's okay. And I can go ahead down here on the button and click Create. And what it's doing now is it's going through and using a template behind the scenes. It's building a template and it's using these particular inputs to go ahead and build my deployment. So there's my subscription ID. There's the name that I picked for it. There's the host. This is called the hosting plan name. This is the app services name. This is the name of the group that it's putting the hosting plan in, and they call it kind of a server farm. This is the name of my of the SKU that I went ahead and selected. That's the size of the virtual machine, and it told me the number that I wanted and basically the size and the version that I wanted for Linux. So the next thing I'm going to do is I can actually look at the template that it used. Behind the scenes, it used this template that I can use. I can download and reuse or recreate so that I can recreate the exact same instance or the exact same thing that I created just a minute ago. Now I see that my deployment's complete. I can go to this resource group to see the resources, or I can manage the apps. I could add a deployment slot. Let's go ahead and just go to the resource and take a look. When I click that button, it takes me into the panel where I have the resources are displayed. And you see that here's the panel where I can pick the various features in App Services. And I promised I would show you a couple of things. One here was the TSL SSL settings, where I can go ahead and add my own host name. I'm looking for slots here. Along the side here, I'll see deployment slots. Here they are. And here I see the deployment slot that was created. The one that was created is out of the box. It was created a deployment slot here. And you see that 100% of the traffic is going to it. If I wanted to create another slot, I just click Add Slot here. And then when I went to deploy it, I could deploy by new version of my application to either one here, either App Services or here. So this gives you an overview of what it's like to create an app service. And if you wait a minute, you can actually see how the web app is performing. So let's take a look here by scrolling down, and you'll see that the app was spinning up, and this is the compute time and the compute data in and out that it took to get your app up and running. So this monitoring is actually part of Azure right out of the box. The next thing you can do is when you're all done, you can clean it up. You can remove the app service by clicking delete and then typing the name in. And with that, we'll finish up the class today. So in our demo, you saw how we created a resource group. We created an app services plan. We created the resource and development slot. That's where you can deploy your web app later. We selected the operating system and the platform version, and we made sure that we tagged our resources. So we discovered that app services are for web apps, API apps, mobile apps, background apps. The app services plan is used to manage the virtual machine, and that slots provide a way to test our apps or to do A/B testing or to be able to show two different versions to the customer. So your next step is to go ahead and deploy an app to the plan or deploy a container to the plan, and we'll cover that next time.